I'm delighted to be able to welcome ResearchEd founder and a powerful voice in education, Tom Bennett, on our next panel. Tom.
Mind working one by one?
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
So I'm here.
Yeah, it's at the end here. Hi. Dave, you sit next to Tom on the other side.
Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, and then Chris.
Thank you to all the participants who joined. Now you can hear me. Okay. Good afternoon. As our honoured speakers join us on the stage, thank you very much for giving up your time to join us at the Climate Change Hub. It's a great honour to be here and to speak to everyone here as well. I'd like to take a little introduction, a little twist to start looking at education specifically and how we need to address the demands upon education over the next 10, 50 or 100 years. So this session is entitled Futureproofing Pupils, preparing pupils for an uncertain and a changing world. And in this session, I'd like for us to try to consider what do we need to do to respond to the fact that the world is changing. And I think also we should be mindful of the fact that the world has always been changing. And the question we need to ask ourselves is now, are there any circumstances which we enjoy or endure now which are peculiar or perhaps more urgent than anything before, not just in terms of climate change, but also in terms of technological revolution and beyond. So while we will be looking at this through a climate change lens, there are obviously other things that we need to consider. I'd just like to introduce our honoured speakers. First of all, my name is Tom Bennett. I'm the founder of ResearchEd. I've also got the dubious curse and privilege of being the Department for Education's independent behaviour advisor. So that's fun. On my left-hand side, I've got Professor Dave Reay, who's the Chair in Carbon Management and Education at the University of Edinburgh. We've also got Chris van der Kuyl, who's the co-founder and chairman of 4J Studios. We've got Professor Rose Luckin, who's a Professor of Learner-Centred Design at the UCL Knowledge Lab. And we've got Alan Mahin, who's the co-founder and Chief Purpose Officer of Brewgooder. And I hope I said that appropriately after all the preparation that we've had here just now. So, the question before us is this. Do we need to change the way we teach students in schools? How do we educate children? How do we future-proof them? How do we future-proof schools? And what in general do we need to do to change education to make it suitable for where we are just now? As I said already, to some extent this has always been a very live issue. Curriculums, what we teach and how we teach, has always changed. We no longer teach now what we did 50 years ago or 100 years ago. So to that extent, this is not a live or new issue. But there may be new circumstances and contexts which make this a greater and more live issue. And that's something I want to try to unpick and unpack a wee bit with our speakers today. So the first thing I'm going to ask to do, just in geographical order, I'm going to ask our speakers to make a 1-minute position statement on what they think about this topic. After that, we'll go to some questions. And then for the last 10 or 15 minutes or so, we will go to the floor. So I hope you've got some questions ready. And if you don't have any questions, I'll just sit and stare at you for 10 minutes in classic teacher mode. So I'll do my very best. It's not my time you're wasting. Anyway, so the first one, sorry. So the first question goes to Chris. Chris, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'm delighted to be here. I might look like a charlatan being a sort of games technology entrepreneur on a panel for education, but if you look at my Twitter bio, just in the middle it just says education zealot, and that comes from the fact that I was brought up in a family of teachers around education and teachers who wanted to contribute to the practice of teaching and education, not just teach alone. So I've been imbued with that from an early age. Secondly, I think it's the beginning, middle and end of all of our futures. What we educate today and how we educate today will drive the economy, will drive response to climate, will drive everything. And what we expect of our young people that are going through that pace of change in their own lives is vital. And that pace of change is the crucial point here. We're living through a world that's changing faster than any of us have ever experienced before. And I would say that even before the pandemic hit us. But if anybody thought that wasn't the case, the last 2 years will have taught them differently. But the crux of it is, it's the slowest pace of change any of us will ever live through again. The pace of change only gets faster from here and exponentially faster. So how do we educate in that environment? I look at 6 things when I look at companies that we invest in, when I look at people that come and work for our business. And I think this is how we need to view our education lens. Are we educating to allow our young people to become more adaptable to this? And it's, firstly, confidence. Anybody that walks in anything I do and is not confident about themselves and confident about their position, as a human, it becomes very difficult to process and listen to them in the right way. So confidence we need to instill and build in every one of our young people. Next thing is vision. Why are you here to do what you want to do? What's your vision? And your vision changes every day and develops. It can be very short term to start with. It can be very grandiose. Doesn't matter, but you need to exude that. But underlying it in those first three things, the most important thing then is substance. And between confidence and vision, you've got to have them, but if there's not substance to back it up in that core learning, whatever that curriculum is, it needs to be there. But then it translates to the next piece for me, which is resilience, adaptability, and humanity. Anyone that goes through life today and doesn't understand how to become resilient is not, as part of their whole education experience, finds their way to resiliency, is going to have a pretty challenging time ahead, because we all have to learn how to do that. The adaptability thing, the best thing I've ever been taught when I went to university was everything we're going to teach you here in the next 4 years will be out of date by the time you leave as a computer scientist. And you're sort of there, I've signed up, I'm used to learning by rote. What do you mean I need to, and what you fundamentally learn is you learn how to learn. And that adaptability is never more so than an internet-enabled world and an information-enabled world where we're overloaded with things, and critical thinking needs to become crucial for us. And the last piece is humanity. If all of this is useless, if we don't exhibit empathy and understanding and core values of humanity that mean we know why we're here. None of us are here to make money as the end goal in itself. We should all be here as humans to make a better world for everybody to be part of. And that's the most fun you can have as well, but you won't do that unless you look at your own humanity, you become empathetic, and you really take that as seriously as anything else. So my short answer to that long preamble is we need to build an education system that delivers those attributes in every single person that goes through it.
Thank you very much for that extensive answer. Dave?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so I was reflecting on the title of this session, and so future-proofing pupils. And it was something, in the UK we had a thing called the Green Jobs Task Force earlier in the year, and we considered this a lot, and it was a lot about, because it was with UK government, what the jobs of the future are going to be, what the skill sets need to be, what the numbers were in terms of heat pump engineers, the rest of it. And that was all well and good, but actually what we quickly discovered is actually we need to do a lot of now-proofing, not just future-proofing. So in terms of some of the bottlenecks for getting to net zero in the UK and becoming more resilient, same globally, my institution, institutions around the world, were producing students who actually aren't now-proofed. Given the speed, like Chris was saying, in terms of the climate emergency we're in, having to kind of then retrain after we train them, we're not, I feel, not doing them the service we should, and actually we're undermining the rate of change in terms of net zero. So I get frustrated a lot because I'm a climate change scientist, and that's frustrating. Teaching is the kind of joy of my life. But that frustration really comes through when we think about this as in the future. So this is for tomorrow in terms of the learning, the attributes. Again, Chris was saying really articulately. And I think one of the dangers at the moment is that we do think of it in terms of let's get past the pandemic, let's recover, and then we'll look at the skills, the education for addressing the climate emergency, and that will be too late. As we all know, here in Glasgow over this couple of weeks, the clock's not only ticking, it's nearly at midnight in terms of 1.5 certainly. So yeah, if I had to rename this session, it would be now proofing the students of the future.
Well, it's not too late. We can certainly do it if you wish. And now Proofing the Future will be running after this session, so thank you very much. Alan?
Yeah, first off, I'm just so proud that Glasgow is playing host to conversations like this. I mean, this is where I was educated at a university level, just down the road, University of Glasgow. I probably have the least authority to speak on this, not just because I'm not particularly an education zealot or an educator myself, but I do believe passionately in young people, albeit I do run a beer company, so there is a bit of tension there. I think for me, there's a fundamental philosophical shift that needs to happen. I went through basically my entire secondary education being told what did I want to be, or being asked the question, what did I want to be? And at that point it was, your aspirations, so some of your aspiration was doctor, lawyer, teacher, dentist, the roles that we play in a very safe and stable world. And the world is anything but safe and stable. So for me, the question is, or what I would love to happen is, instead of what do you want to be, it's why do you want to be? And like Chris says, that why will change, day by day, even within a given day. But the constant reaffirmation of meaning and purpose for young people, for me then helps to unlock the potential of young people. And if, I don't think anyone in this audience or in this panel would disagree that if we unlock human potential, it's going to be a net benefit for everybody. And once that starts to happen, people imagine themselves not as fitting into cookie cutter careers, but as actually agents of change within a system rather than functionaries of it. So for me, that philosophical change would be great, and I think that's what we're on our way to, hopefully.
Thank you very much, Jan. And speaking as somebody who was born and raised in Glasgow, I can confirm the young people are very, very concerned with beer on many shapes and forms, so you're certainly right there. And Rose.
Thanks, Tom. And the lovely thing about going last is I can say, well, I agree with all of the things, very sensible things that have been said so far. But I would like to emphasize that I'm sure all of you know, but I want to stress the fact that education can change lives. I went from being a school refuser at 13 to a professor. I didn't even know that job existed when I was refusing school at 13. So it really can change lives. And I was very struck by a wonderful event that happened this morning, the big lesson for nature and climate. Lovely Alison Bellwood did this morning. You can watch it if you missed it live. And one of the speakers there left me with a real thought worm, where she was talking about winners and losers. And I think we don't spend enough time looking at the entire ecosystem of our education system, if you like. We tend to think of its schools, its colleges, its universities, its parents, its students, but it is an ecosystem. And for an ecosystem to flourish and for the communities within it to flourish, we all know it needs to be balanced. And I worry at the moment that the winners of our education system may not be best equipped to make the decisions for the future that will not lead to too many losers really suffering. And that's not because I don't have confidence in young people. I have huge confidence in young people, but I'm not sure we're equipping them with the right tools to make those decisions that take that broader view. We so fall into the trap of seeing things as silos and thinking that if we focus on tackling this silo, say the school, then somehow we'll solve all of the issues. And of course we won't. So I think we have to really get much better at looking things as ecosystems and helping our young people, yes, of course, to have vision, to be resilient, I agree, totally, flexible, but very much seeing beyond the individual silo of where they are and thinking about what they do if they're successful and how it impacts on other people and how they can try and ensure that that impact is positive.
Thank you, Rose. I'm fascinated by the different perspectives on that one fairly simple position there. I'm going to move on to my first question, and I'm going to go fairly leadenly down the line, if that's okay, and we'll see how many questions we get through in the time. The first question really addresses something which is quite close to my heart, which is that as somebody closely involved in education, a week doesn't go by in which somebody doesn't call for something to be added to the curriculum. And it's normally to solve some concern, perhaps sometimes an issue of the week, sometimes an issue of the decade or indeed a lifetime, but something needs to be added to the curriculum in order to fix some enormous, complex social problem. And, I'm speaking as somebody who, taught citizenship for many, many years. Citizenship was introduced as a way of trying to resolve some of the conflicts and the tensions which exist within complex societies. And then, of course, watched as all of those aspirations melted against the cliffs of society's indifference as the London riots and other such things happened. But anyway, perhaps I'm being cynical. My question really is this. If we're going to change the curriculum in some way, or change the way we teach children, and I would take on Rose's point about trying to see it as a broader ecosystem, but given that the majority of children go through a primary, secondary and tertiary stage of education, well, tertiary, hopefully, education, what do we need to put in the curriculum that will assist? And crucially, and I think this for me is the more provocative question, what needs to come out, given that this will always be a trade-off Can I start again with you, Rose, then, if you don't mind?
It's such an important question, and that bit about what you take out is always the killer, isn't it? Because it's very difficult to decide that. I don't actually see it as a taking out kind of situation. I've spent a long time thinking about artificial intelligence. That's my background. And I've spoken on many occasions about how we need to foster within young people, and indeed within everybody, the kinds of things that we can't automate, the sort of intelligent behavior that we cannot automate. And actually where you started, Chris, sums up quite a lot of those things that we can't automate. And yet at the same time, that technology, that data-driven technology, not exclusively, but mainly data-driven technology, is also a huge potential benefit in that desire to develop those non-automatable types of intelligent behavior. So what does that mean for this question about what should we add and what should we take away? As I say, I don't see it that way. I think we just need to see the curriculum differently so that perhaps when we're teaching a subject area, we don't see it as that individual subject area. We see it as a subject area that's connected to lots of others. And of course, we can't deliver a lesson entirely about all of the possible disciplines we could have. And we need specialists, of course we do. But we need to deliver it in a way where each area of the curriculum, for example, is contextualized to at least some of the near neighbors, so that you get that perspective of joining up. And I think we need to help young people to understand what knowledge actually is. I've become increasingly disappointed and concerned as somebody who teaches I'm so fortunate to teach some of the brightest young people in the world, and yet I find increasingly they have a very impoverished understanding of what knowledge is. It's very much seen as something you're given rather than something you're constructed. So I think also if we can start tackling the way that we talk about subjects from the perspective of why is this subject like this and why should we believe this to be true? You know, what's good evidence that should make me believe that something is true? That kind of real meta understanding. I hate the word meta now since Facebook changed its name to Meta. I've written loads of papers about meta intelligence. Now I'm going to have to rethink it because I don't want to be confused. But we can change the way we do it, Tom, I think, to stop that, bring something in, take something out. Of course, we need data literacy, but we can blend that into the way that we teach so that we don't come up against that really difficult problem of adding something and thinking we've got to take something away. I hope that makes sense. It's difficult to explain in such a short period of time.
It certainly does. I should also point out at this point that other social media platforms are available.
Yes.
Many, many more, in fact. Alan.
Listen, I just want to build on really what Rose was talking about. For me, I don't think we should ever start from the position of what should be taken away from kids or young people. I don't think that's the most constructive way to look at it. But there's time pressures, right? You know, a teacher can only teach for a certain amount of time in a day, and you know, potentially a kid can only learn for a certain amount of the day, unless it's in a different context. I mean, one of the things that Chris didn't sort of mention in his own sort of introduction to himself was the role of video games in learning. I mean, I did so much of my learning just from having fun with something that was educational, and at the time I did not perceive it to be educational. So what things can we supplement the extracurricular, right, the super extracurricular, with things that are fun that people learn? And sometimes that might just be social games, right? Just, you know, learning from other people. And when I find myself looking at what the big threat may have been, you know, to young people that are going through the education system now, and you look at artificial intelligence, you think, yes, there will be lots of jobs that are supplanted, but there is enormous benefit. I mean, one of the big things I sort of tend to try and live by is the Hooterling quote, which is, where the danger is, the saving power also grows. And these things are not always totally good and they're not always totally bad, but it might take a while for artificial intelligence to learn the soft skills that might not get you into Harvard, but will get you really far in life, and that is 100% resilience, compassion, humanity.
If ever.
if ever, and that emotional intelligence that you need. So I think maybe we need to think about how we make education not something that's just simply done in the classroom, and we might find a whole world of things that the kids want to learn. And you mentioned meta, and if you look at some of the 21st century skills, why don't we look into the past for some of those skills that have been effectively timeless? And that might go back to the Greeks, it might go to the Renaissance, it might go to the Scottish Enlightenment or whatever. So yeah, I think there's many more ways to learn, and we should start from a position of maximizing the non-classroom time for that.
Thank you very much, Alan. Dave?
Yeah, so I've got to be careful with this question, because being married to a teacher and adding stuff to the curriculum, I might find I'm not allowed back in the house tonight. For me, it echoes what Rose and Alan have said, just in terms of, this is about embedding, climate and sustainability, in my view, in the curriculum, and that it's not replacement. One of my examples for our own students is business, and you think about, learning business studies, and that is something where if you're wanting to actually provide learning which is congruent with what is happening in the world, that has to embed climate change and sustainability. Otherwise, you're not going to have the knowledge and skills you actually need to successfully do your work in the business world. So it's that embedding, but that doesn't just come out of thin air. That needs to be supported. So I think it is about embedding rather than replacing, but then it's how teachers, actually they're going to need more time for and support to actually do that embedding. The continuing professional development, help hopefully from the universities and colleges into schools and vice versa, so that co-creation. But it's kind of not one or the other. It is kind of actually putting it right into the grain of those disciplinary subjects, as well as the ones which are cross-cutting, because that's what life is. That's what the climate emergency is. It is through the whole of society, and so the education, I think, needs to reflect that.
Thank you. And Chris? Thanks, Tom. I'm going to take the radical position here. This very question, and the fact that you're even having to ask it, shows that the sausage machine of industrialised education is utterly useless. Yes. It's been set up over the 20th century to set hurdles and gates through which we all have to pass through to qualify for the next stage, and then by being there and being part of that system, we reflect it back and measure everyone else on the same system. And God forbid if our children aren't given the opportunity to jump through those same hoops at the same pace, through league tables or however they're measuring. So the whole industry of education is predicated on a nonsense, which does not reflect how people learn in an excellent way, and how people become super learners. Scotland actually didn't do a bad job of coming up with a philosophy for curriculum for excellence. They did an horrific job of then resourcing it and changing the assessment framework to make it, well, because it can't work with one, can't work without the other. If anyone looks today at the state of education and cannot see that the beginnings of things like Khan Academy, Duolingo, adaptive learning platforms that use the very, as Rose and I would attest, the very light end of artificial intelligence, not true artificial intelligence, to incredibly accelerate the people that are, they attribute and they assess in real time all the time, and they then optimize the learning experience based on that. And they don't get it right every time, but it's night and day compared to what's happening in the classroom today. The hybrid of that with excellent individuals, with human-to-human contact with learners, is what's going to take over the world and completely destroy what we understand. And the teaching profession needs to wake up, or they'll all be out of a job really, really quickly. In that context, I'm excited by it, but excited by the idea that we know what the information revolution does to industries, and I'm excited to see countries and areas that embrace the opportunity that's there. But if we don't, we absolutely will get what we've always got. If you go back and look in history, the first Enlightenment, or the Enlightenment, of which Scotland was a fantastic participant in, it was very small numbers of elite individuals that were streamlined through a church-based education system, sitting their PhDs by the time they were 15 or 16. It was actually quite horrific. the amount of pressure that was put on these individuals. I think we can look forward to a more democratized version of that, but it has to be technology enabled, and it has to be as radical as Elon Musk and Tesla's approach to transportation. Somebody needs to grab this by the horns and push it through. Otherwise, we're going to continue to fail and have panels like this where we decide what's going in and out. We shouldn't be deciding what's going in and out. The learners should be deciding what's going in and out.
Some radical views there. Thank you very much, Chris. Not quite right. I'm going to, just because I'm mindful of time, and I want to try to get some questions from the audience, I'm going to go for one last question to the panel. And the questions have been the answers have been absolutely brilliant, thought-provoking, and multi-angular, so I'm delighted, so thank you once again. I'm going to actually try and pick up a point which Chris raised there about technology and the promise of technology. And I'm sure you'll be keen to get on this, so just let me get to the end of the question, which is this, and rightly so. That technology has often promised a great deal, and people who've been involved in technology have often promised a great deal from technology, from the invention of the television, to the overhead projector, to the interactive whiteboard and so on, to the iPad and so on and so on. And the revolution has been prophesized, but it's never quite materialized. And we've been through a most extraordinary 18 months, which has been an unwilling and unwitting experiment in, for example, remote learning, distance learning, and so on. And I think we're still processing the data from that period of time as to what the real learning is. So I guess my point is this: are we blinded by science? Is technology, often commercially driven, offering answers that educators aren't asking? And can tech revolutionize teaching? So I'm going to come back to you at last, if I may, Chris, and I'm going to start with Alan, yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to, I guess, open up that COVID point, and whilst I agree 100% that technology probably can be, if it's empowering students and it's empowering the learners, an absolute silver bullet, right? In a utopian world, it can be. But one of the things I find quite uncomfortable is that we probably risk a sort of tech haves and tech nots that was really shown up by the pandemic. Yes, we were able to carry on learning of some sort, but there's a danger that those at the bottom get further cemented in the bottom. And if you look even in a wider context from that, does there become not just inequality within the Western world and developed countries, but between, and that just becomes exponential and insurmountable. So I'm not the most informed voice and probably don't have the most interesting opinion on that, but how can we empower people at all levels so that they actually have the access to the things that can change their life, rather than simply just be stuck with not having that access?
Thank you very much. And you are perfectly informed and far more informed than most people I meet on Twitter, so very happy to. That's not a high bar, if I'm honest. If I'm honest, just before breakfast. Rose, can I pick that with you, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to agree and disagree with Chris first, just because that's what the panel's about. It's meant to be about, isn't it? So I completely agree. Assessment is the thing that stops progress, to be honest. And it's a political issue, let's be frank. It's not a technical issue so let's just get that, I agree. I don't see teachers disappearing, though. I really, that's not what you meant, that's good. So we're not going to disagree. Sorry, guys. It's always good when you have a disagreement on a panel. But I kind of think I see technology slightly differently, because I think there has been a revolution. It just hasn't been where we've been looking. There has been a revolution. Social media has brought about a revolution. People's lives are being manipulated by big tech companies, by data, by AI. That is a revolution, without doubt. And some of the side effects are not good, and some of them are positive. And I think we don't look at that revolution and say, well, is it the device? Is it the phone? Is it the computer? We have done in the past. But the truth is, it's not. It's the infrastructure. And that's where I think we need to look for real tech innovation in the future. Yes, there are some wonderful individual technologies out there, augmented reality, gaming, they've got fantastic things to do. But they'll be even more powerful when they're connected. And you see the connection as an intelligence infrastructure that is the data about how people are learning using these technologies, but shared between the different devices through infrastructure. And most importantly, that technical or data infrastructure must be complemented by the human infrastructure that interprets the data, to support learning. So I think technology needs to be seen quite differently. If we get that infrastructure right, then it won't be a case of classrooms or schools full of technology that's necessarily visible. It could be that the technology enables a more effective conversation between a teacher and a student, because the technology has helped that teacher understand something about that student that they didn't know before, because it happened at a time when the teacher wasn't there. So I think the real revolution needs to be seen as something that's infrastructure. Now, there are lots of ethical issues there, and it's really important that we tackle those, and that has to be done through education as well. But I think, yes, that technology can bring about a revolution. It already has in our society. But we need to get beyond looking at just the individual technologies.
Thank you very much, Rose. The revolution happened and I missed it. I feel guilty. I feel more guilty than normal, if I'm honest. Dave?
Yeah, so I'm a bit equivocal on the tech stuff. So Alan's points were spot on. It's kind of, there's great things that have come through, and Rose has said as well, it's facilitated some great improvements in terms of accessibility, but there's that real risk in terms of actually more inequality of access and more of a multi-tiered system. And that's something where, it's not just kind of international, so, global south versus global north access, but actually you see it just within Scotland. If you're in a rich school versus a poor school, that accessibility. The other thing where I'm equivocal on it is if I think about this room. So this is my favourite room in the whole of COP. I mean, this is just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, they should have made an effort, really.
Yeah, they should have tidied it up a bit. Yeah. And we're using technology today, and that is great. But I was sat in here earlier thinking, I'd love to bring my students in here, and we would not be like doing Zoom calls or using any tech. We would be talking about nature. And actually, one of the risks here is that we think the answer to future-proofing education is tech. And one of the reasons we're in the trouble we're in is we've moved away from our connection with nature, is my view, and actually making sure those opportunities for everyone, education for all in terms of outdoor education and understanding of our natural environment, that actually, it certainly cannot come at the cost of more tech.
Thank you very much. And if I can just say about connecting to nature, the reason I was coughing a minute ago is because I swallowed a midgie which flew in my mouth.
Oh, no.
There are insects, wasn't there?
We have an ecosystem in here. It sounds like the beginning of a children's poem, but anyway. So, Chris, what do you think?
Well, to pick up on Rose's point first, just to qualify, 100% I think teachers have an amazing future ahead of them if they embrace the right way to learn and not the industrial processes. And actually say, no, I don't want to do that because my job has told me for the past 20 years that this is how I teach. Back to my adaptability point, teachers have to be the most adaptable of all. The technology issue around widening access and inequality just simply, to me, has to be solved. I mean, there are amazing programs going on at the moment. In India, for example, for the sort of $20 smartphone, and actually looking at access to data as being a human right and those kind of, because I think it actually has become that important. The power of the technologies that those of us that can afford them have need to be, need to reach everyone. And education is one of the principal purposes of that. My last 10 years has pretty much revolved around 4J Studios' responsibility for Minecraft on games consoles. And when we got into it, we loved the game. We thought it was a cool game. The guys in Sweden that had invented it were incredible people. And we all felt a bit like rock stars as the sales went, larger than Dark Side of the Moon, for example. It's like, oh my God, we're bigger than Pink Floyd. And then one day we kind of asked ourselves, why was this happening? And we looked out onto the internet and we saw this plethora of talent, this lake of talent out there, specifically in YouTube land, making videos whilst playing Minecraft, about playing Minecraft and about teaching others what they were doing. And we suddenly realized we weren't rock stars anymore, we were Fender. We made the guitars. These guys and girls and these young, pretty much all young people that are out there, they're the rock stars. They generate the content that everybody else wants to emulate and go on the journey. And in terms of the educational content that they were delivering, we weren't doing it, they were doing it. It was unbelievable. Out of nowhere, Minecraft became the most used educational software in the world. Probably the principal reason Microsoft paid the amazing $2.5 billion they did to buy Minecraft was Minecraft education, and they doubled down on it, and they've made it this incredible resource. So the technology solutions are already there. They just need to be in the hands of the right people, and the right people then need to be empowered to distribute them into the hands of the learners. And the distribution methods around things like YouTube now are democratizing that. So no longer do education authorities the world over control, in most countries, what people can learn. Their teachers, open their eyes to go, here's 10 rabbit holes to go down. And it's a classic principles that we all learned at university. The great people we bumped into at university gave us reading lists, gave us signposts to rabbit holes to run down. That's what has to happen at all levels. And most young people are already doing that every night. What we need to help them with is having the tools, the intellectual tools, when they go down those rabbit holes, to understand what they're seeing and to put them into their learning experience, build on that, and build the substance that I talked about earlier.
Thank you very much. And you talked about rabbit holes there. I think that's a wonderful metaphor for the way in which these conversations go about curriculum and process and the way education gets taken forward. Now, I'm extremely conscious of time, and I know that the organisers are more conscious of time than even I am, apart from Robin, who wanted us to go to lunch 35 minutes ago. That's okay. But thanks for staying. Listen, I think we've got about 5 minutes, if we may. Now, can we take some questions? If anyone, no questions, that's great. So anyway, thanks very much. Have a nice time. There's a lady just over there. Yes, feel free. I'm afraid we will unfairly privilege the people we can see. Yeah. I'd so apologise.
Hi, good afternoon. It's a point as much as it is a question.
Oh, good.
You talked about the importance of technology. I'm the head teacher of an inner city Glasgow secondary school. We were very fortunate in that we were one of the first schools to have the rollout of iPads. So the minute lockdown happened a year and a half ago, our kids were instantly, we were connected through technology, regardless of background or socio-economic circumstances of each pupil. So we instantly had that. But the minute the kids have come back to school, it's not the technology that they're craving, it's the relationships that they've missed, and that's what they're craving, and that's what's made the big difference for our young people coming back. Now, we're also in a fortunate position in that we were given additional COVID recovery money, and instead of investing that always in teachers and in teaching time, we've really looked quite broadly at partnerships, and that has made a huge difference for our young people as well. So you're talking about how do we change the curriculum. I'd just like your views on how we embed more partnerships within secondary schools and primary as well, because for me, it's not the iPads that have made the difference and the great glittery technology. It's actually been the people and the diverse relationships that we have within school now, rather than just teacher-pupil.
Thank you very much. I love the fact that actually was a comment, there was a question, so thank you for that. I do appreciate that. And also, it's a great point. It's never the tool, it's how we use it, but although sometimes, of course, the tool does matter. Does anybody, now this is very much an option, does anybody want to address that?
Just very quickly.
Yes, please do, Dave.
Thanks, Doc. So just on the partnerships thing, so this is like from a personal perspective, I think our universities, not particularly my own, we're failing on that in terms of schools and colleges. And part of that is down to the fact that our university is very much kind of focused on delivery at that tertiary level and not looking at the supply chain, if you're thinking of it like a business. And so one of the things that I think should happen, and we're kind of having a go at my boss trying to make it happen, is that it should be part of our job, our workload model, or whatever you'd like to call it, to actually work with schools in our catchment to help build capacity, to help co-create resources, rather than it just being kind of, oh, we'll just accept your great students and the work you've done with them through the door when they arrive at the uni. So I'd like to see all unis do much more of that. At the moment, I know it happens, but it's more patchy. There's no mandate for all of us as academic staff that we should be doing that, and I think that would be really powerful.
Thank you. And Chris?
I think it's a brilliant point to make, because for me, two things I would say. One, were it not for partnerships, I would have had no idea how to get into business. So I was at school with, as I said at the very start, a familial background in and around education. People had kind of normal jobs. And then one day we did Young Enterprise at school, and Young Enterprise had a deal where there was always, and still to this day, a commercial business that comes in and partners with the school to mentor the young people and show them what it's like in business. And in our case, it was the local supermarket chain, William Lowe, and the marketing director came in and took us in, and suddenly in 2 visits, I went, these are ordinary people. This business thing, I could do what they could do. For that visit, I had absolutely no idea that I could even think about being, and from that day onwards, I decided I was going to set up a business. That then leads to the crucial nature of of those of us that are not professional educators not expecting that you're going to fix this for us. That it's your job to fix it, and it's my job to moan at you for not doing it. We're all in this together. If it really is the most important thing, we need to be right at your door saying, what can we do to help? But at the same time, you need to let us in. And I'm not aiming this at you personally, because I'm sure you would, but there's been a strong view in terms of programs like Teach First. It seemed like quite a toxic thing to allow people that had no formal teaching background to be let near children. Come on, with the right frameworks around this, some of these people that come from outside education could potentially be some of the best teachers imaginable. So let's find the right way to build a risk framework to let everybody partner and help.
Can I
Thank
just
you very
pick
much.
up on
Yes,
something
please.
that Alan said, and it speaks to what you've been saying, Chris, as well, and that is co-creation, because that's what partnerships can bring. That's how we're going to create the best ecosystem for education, is co-creation between the different stakeholders. That's how it has to be. Technology can enable that, but it's not the front, it's the enabler. So absolutely, that partnerships, but that co-creation word, I think, is fundamentally important.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'm just going to, we've got just 2 minutes left. So if I can we have to take one more question? And can we make it a super quick question? I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
I'm not hearing the new paradigm in the conversation. In 2004, 48 hours after I left Indonesia, the tsunami came. The elephants had gone uphill. Farmers who watched the elephants go uphill went uphill. The elephants still had something intact that led them uphill when the tsunami was imminent. On the beach, the partiers, right? Those of us who can go and travel and be on the beach, we're stuck there. No sensibilities around what the Earth system, with the intelligence of the cosmic order, was communicating to us. This is not what we get in our education system. We need to find our way there. That's what we have as a generation here. But turning on our capacities, our innate capacities right now, is going to be fundamentally what that new paradigm is. And I'll give you a clue here, in my view. That wonderful definition of entrepreneurship, which is really Undertaker, is all about being able to bring to rest, reverently, something that is done. And being able to bring in the emergent energies from that spent life force when we lay down what's old, what's done. We need to know this system that we're in is aberrated, it's broken, it's collapsed, my friends. So we need to be talking about everything we're doing in the sense of what is emergent. And I think we have innate technology within these bodies that correspond to the living universe that we need to activate. And there's science out there, if there's even education out there around this, and it's difficult to get it taught in schools. I work with Tom Cech. He was Nobel laureate of RNA.
I'm sorry, can I press you for a question here? I do apologize. We're almost out of time.
So the question is, in this one, how can we, with our imagination, spin out of the aberrated system?
Thank you very much. Beautifully expressed also. We have got literally 45 seconds. Does anyone want to have a brief response to that? In itself, it's quite a beautiful mission statement. So
Yeah.
I'm happy for it not to be responded to. Fine. Listen, just simply because of time, if we had another 45 minutes, we could have really delved into that. Thank you very much, madam. I just want to say thank you very, very much to everyone else. I'm so sorry that for a topic that we could have talked about all day long, certainly we could have unpacked this for weeks and weeks and weeks. We've had such a short period of time. But I hope that's whetted your appetite and provided some stimulus and some thought provocation for you, or at least avenues to take in the future direction, which I guess is something which this whole day has been about. It's been an absolute pleasure, albeit a brief one, to speak to you. I hope none of you swallow any more midges on your way out of the Glaswegian rainforest.
That's lunch.
Indeed, that is lunch. Listen, I just want to say thank you very much to Dave Reay, to Rose Luckin, to Alan Mahon, and Chris van der Kuyl. Thank you very much. And from me, Tom Bennett. Thank you.